I still remember sitting in that cold county jail cell, staring at the concrete walls, wondering how my entire life had collapsed in less than 24 hours. 2 years ago, I was just Brian, a regular 25-year-old guy working as a junior architect at a small firm in Portland, Oregon. My relationship with my dad, Richard, was solid enough even after he remarried 3 years earlier. His new wife, Linda, brought along her daughter, Madison, who was 19 at the time. Madison always seemed sweet, friendly, someone I genuinely saw as a little sister. We would have family dinners on weekends, share stories, laugh together. Everything felt peaceful, normal, safe. Until one Friday night in August, when everything changed. One phone call. One lie. And suddenly, I was not Brian the architect anymore. I was Brian the accused, the arrested, the betrayed son whose own father would not even listen. Before I take you back to that night, let me know where you are watching from. If this story resonates with you in any way, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. This is my real story, and I am sharing it because I hope it might help someone out there who feels trapped, falsely accused, or abandoned by the people they trusted most. Sometimes the truth takes time to surface, but it does surface. Now let me take you back to that Friday evening that destroyed everything I knew. It was around 8:30 on a Friday night in August. I was relaxing in my studio apartment in downtown Portland, finally unwinding after finishing a major project at work. I had just cracked open a cold beer and settled onto my worn couch to watch a basketball game when my phone buzzed on the coffee table. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me pick up. The voice on the other end was shaking, crying. It took me a second to recognize it. Madison. My stepsister was sobbing so hard, she could barely get the words out. She told me she had gone to a party with some friends, but they had all left without her. Her car had broken down in a parking lot about 15 miles away. She sounded terrified, alone, stuck in the dark. I asked her why she did not call her mom or my dad. She said Linda was strict and would be furious if she found out Madison had gone to a party without permission. She was scared of getting grounded or worse. I did not hesitate. I told her to stay put, send me her location, and I would come get her right away. I grabbed my keys to my 2015 Honda Civic, a gray sedan that had seen better days, and headed out into the night. The drive took about 25 minutes. The roads were quiet streetlights, casting long shadows across empty intersections. I found Madison standing alone in the parking lot of a closed shopping mall, wearing an oversized gray hoodie and dark jeans. Her eyes were red from crying. She looked exhausted, smaller, somehow vulnerable in a way I had never seen before. She climbed into the passenger seat, thanking me over and over. I told her it was no problem, that family looks out for each other. On the drive back, she talked about the party, how boring it had been, how her so-called friends had ditched her. I listened, asking questions here and there, trying to make her feel better. The conversation felt normal, comfortable, just like any brother and sister would talk. Nothing about that drive felt strange or dangerous. It was just me helping out someone I cared about. About halfway home, I realized my gas tank was nearly empty. I pulled into a Shell station on Burnside Street. The digital clock on my dashboard read 10:17 p.m. I got out, filled up the tank, while Madison stayed in the car, scrolling through her phone. The whole stop took maybe 5 minutes. I paid with my card at the pump, got back in, and continued driving. We arrived at my dad's house, a 2-story suburban home with a neat front lawn and white shutters, around 10:40 p.m. The lights inside were off. Madison said Richard and Linda had probably gone to bed early like they always did. I pulled up to the curb in front of the house. Madison grabbed her bag, thanked me one more time, and stepped out of the car. She waved as she walked toward the front door. I waited until she unlocked it and went inside before I drove away. The entire interaction felt completely ordinary. I went back to my apartment, brushed my teeth, and fell asleep by midnight, thinking I had just done a good deed. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of someone pounding on my apartment door. It was 7 a.m. on a Saturday. I stumbled out of bed, confused and annoyed, wondering who would show up unannounced at this hour. When I opened the door, 2 police officers stood there in full uniform. One was a tall man with graying hair, Officer Davis. The other was a woman with sharp eyes, Officer Park. Officer Davis asked if I was Brian. I nodded, still half asleep, completely unprepared for what came next. He told me I was under arrest for sexual assault. I actually laughed at first because I thought it had to be some kind of mistake, maybe a prank. But their faces were stone-cold serious. Officer Park asked me to turn around and put my hands behind my back. I started to protest, asking who I was supposed to have assaulted, demanding an explanation. That is when Officer Davis said the name. Madison. My stepsister. The girl I had just helped the night before. The girl I saw as family. She had reported that I had attacked her during the drive home. My brain could not process the words. I kept saying it was impossible, that I had only given her a ride, that I dropped her off safely. But they were not interested in my explanations. They read me my Miranda rights while snapping cold metal handcuffs around my wrists. Neighbors started coming out onto their porches, staring, whispering. I felt my face burn with humiliation and disbelief. They put me in the back of their patrol car, a black and white vehicle with a metal grate separating the front seats from the back. My mind was spinning, trying to make sense of what was happening. Madison had accused me of attacking her. But why? Nothing had happened. I had done nothing wrong. The officers drove me to the police station in silence, while I sat there trembling, my heart hammering against my ribs. At the station, they put me in a small interrogation room with gray walls, a metal table, and 2 uncomfortable chairs. A large mirror covered one wall. I knew it was one-way glass. I sat there alone for what felt like hours, though it was probably only 30 minutes. Then 2 detectives walked in. Detective Morris was a man in his 40s, with a tired face and a coffee-stained tie. Detective Hayes was a woman in her 30s, with dark hair pulled back tightly. They sat across from me and started asking questions. I told them everything exactly as it had happened. Madison called me. I drove to pick her up. We talked on the way home. I stopped for gas. I dropped her off at my dad's house. I went home and went to sleep. That was it. Nothing else happened. Detective Morris leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, studying me. He asked why Madison would call me instead of her own parents. I explained that she said she was afraid of getting in trouble with Linda. Detective Hayes then dropped the bomb. She told me that Madison had been taken to the hospital that morning. She had bruises on her arms and neck. She was undergoing a rape kit examination. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. I could not breathe. I kept saying I did not touch her, that I had no idea where those bruises came from, that this was insane. But Detective Morris asked the question that made my blood run cold. Did I have an alibi? Was there anyone who could confirm I went straight home after dropping Madison off? I lived alone. No one saw me come home at 11 p.m. I had no proof, no witness, nothing. I asked for a lawyer. They let me make 1 phone call. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I called my dad, Richard. I thought he would help me. I thought he would believe me. I was so wrong. The phone rang 3 times before Richard picked up. His voice was cold, flat. Just one word. Hello. I started talking fast, desperate to explain. Dad, I need your help. I have been arrested. Madison lied about what happened last night. I just gave her a ride. You have to believe me. He cut me off before I could finish. His voice turned hard, angry, in a way I had never heard before. Do not you dare say my stepdaughter lied. I felt my chest tighten. I tried again. Dad, I did not do anything. I just picked her up and brought her home. That is all. Please, you have to listen to me. But Richard was not listening. He said Madison was at the hospital right now. She had bruises. She was traumatized. He asked me how I could do something like that. I begged him to believe me. I reminded him I was his son, that he knew me, that I would never hurt anyone. But he just kept talking over me, saying he had seen Madison crying that morning, that Linda was devastated, that the evidence was right there. I was crying now, something I had not done in years. I told him I was telling the truth. I asked him why Madison would lie. He said she had no reason to. He said I was 27 years old, and she was only 19. He called what I supposedly did disgusting. Then he said the words that broke me completely. "You are not my son anymore. Do not call me again. We are pressing full charges." The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, staring at it like it was a foreign object. My own father had just disowned me, without even giving me a chance to defend myself. He chose to believe Madison over me instantly, without hesitation, without a single doubt. The detectives took the phone back. I do not remember much after that. Everything felt numb. They assigned me a public defender, because I could not afford a private lawyer. My salary as a junior architect was only around $45,000 a year. I had about $8,000 in savings, nowhere near enough to hire someone good. The public defender they gave me was named Troy Bennett, a tired-looking man in his 50s with gray stubble and a wrinkled suit. His office was cluttered with stacks of case files piled on every surface. Troy looked over my file quickly and told me it looked bad. Madison had medical evidence, bruises, a hospital report, her testimony. I asked if there was any way to prove I did not do it. He asked if I had any evidence, any witnesses, any dashcam footage from my car. I shook my head. My old Civic did not have a dashcam. I had no proof of anything. Troy sighed and said it was my word against hers, and she had physical injuries. He told me to prepare for the worst. That was when the reality hit me. I might actually go to prison for something I did not do. I could not afford bail, which was set at $50,000, so I stayed in county jail waiting for trial. 3 months. 90 days locked in a place that smelled like sweat, disinfectant, and despair. I shared a cell with 5 other men. Some were in for drug charges, some for assault, some for theft. When they asked what I was in for, and I told them sexual assault, the way they looked at me changed. In prison culture, people accused of sex crimes are at the bottom. They are hated, targeted, treated like dirt. One afternoon in the cafeteria, a guy named Derek, a big man in his 40s with tattoos covering his arms, walked up behind me and shoved me hard into the table. My tray clattered to the floor. He called me disgusting, told me people like me did not deserve to breathe. I tried to explain I was innocent, but no one wanted to hear it. Guards broke it up, but they did not do much else. I learned quickly to keep my head down, stay quiet, and avoid everyone. At night, lying on the thin mattress that barely covered the metal bunk, I stared at the ceiling and tried to understand how my life had come to this. Just days ago, I had a job, an apartment, a future. Now I had nothing. My employer, the architecture firm, fired me as soon as they heard about the arrest. My friends stopped returning my calls. My dad had abandoned me. I felt completely alone, drowning in a nightmare I could not wake up from. There were nights I thought about giving up, just pleading guilty to make it all stop. But something inside me refused. I was innocent. I knew I was innocent. And even though no one else believed me, I could not betray myself by admitting to something I did not do. So I waited. I survived. And I hoped that somehow, some way, the truth would come out. 3 months later, my trial finally began. The courtroom was small, formal, intimidating. Judge Patterson, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and graying hair, presided over the case. The prosecuting attorney, District Attorney Miller, was a man in his 50s with a reputation for being aggressive and unforgiving. He was determined to convict me. I sat at the defense table next to Troy, wearing a cheap suit we had borrowed from a donation program for defendants who could not afford their own clothes. Across the room, Madison sat with the prosecution. She wore a white blouse and navy blue dress pants. She looked small, fragile, innocent. Behind her sat Richard and Linda. My dad would not even look at me. Linda glared with pure hatred in her eyes. District Attorney Miller called Madison to the witness stand. She walked up slowly, her head down, and took the oath. Then she sat and began to cry as she told her story. She said I had picked her up that night, but instead of driving straight home, I pulled over onto a dark, empty road. She said I touched her, forced myself on her, ignored her pleas to stop. She said she was terrified that she fought back, but I was too strong. Her voice broke as she described the horror of that night. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and shout that none of it was true. But Troy put a hand on my arm, keeping me seated. I just sat there, shaking my head, whispering no over and over under my breath. It was not true. None of it was true. But the jury was watching Madison cry, and I could see the disgust on their faces when they looked at me. When it was Troy's turn to cross-examine, he asked Madison why she had called me instead of her parents. She gave the same answer I had told the police. She was afraid of getting in trouble. He asked if there were any other witnesses, anyone who saw the alleged attack. She said no, it was too dark, too isolated. He asked where exactly I had pulled over. She hesitated, saying she could not remember the exact street name, just that it was somewhere empty and scary. Then Troy asked if I had stopped anywhere else during the drive. Madison said no, that I had driven straight from the parking lot to the place where the attack happened, then to her house. But as I sat there listening, something clicked in my mind. That was not true. I had stopped. I had stopped at the Shell station on Burnside Street to get gas. I leaned over and whispered urgently to Troy. I stopped at a Shell station on Burnside Street around 10:15 p.m. I got gas. There might be cameras. Troy's eyes widened slightly. He stood up and addressed the judge. Your Honor, I request a recess. We have new evidence to investigate. District Attorney Miller immediately objected, calling it a delay tactic. But Judge Patterson asked Troy what evidence he was referring to. Troy explained that I had just informed him I had stopped at a gas station that night, and there might be surveillance footage that could corroborate my timeline. Judge Patterson thought for a moment, then granted a 2-day recess. She warned Troy this was his last chance. If we did not come back with something solid, the trial would proceed, and I would almost certainly be convicted. As the courtroom emptied, I felt a tiny flicker of hope for the first time in months. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to prove my innocence. The next 2 days were a blur of frantic activity. Troy managed to get me released temporarily with an ankle monitor while we investigated. We drove together to the Shell station on Burnside Street. My heart was pounding the entire way. If they did not have the footage anymore, I was done. We walked into the station and asked to speak to the manager. A guy in his 30s named David came out from the back office. Troy explained the situation as carefully as he could without going into too much detail. We needed to see surveillance footage from a specific date 3 months ago. David looked skeptical at first, but something in Troy's tone must have convinced him this was serious. He took us to the back office and started searching through the digital archives. He told us they kept surveillance footage for 90 days before it was automatically deleted. My stomach dropped. Today was day 87 since that night. We had made it just in time. David found the footage from August, the night in question, and scrubbed through to around 10:15 p.m. And there it was, my gray Honda Civic pulling into the gas station. The timestamp read 10:17 p.m. The camera clearly showed me getting out of the car alone, walking to the pump, filling up the tank. Madison stayed in the passenger seat, visible through the window, scrolling on her phone. I was at the pump for about 5 minutes. At 10:22 p.m., I got back in the car and drove away. Troy asked David if the camera captured anything inside the vehicle. David said no, the camera only covered the pump area and the surrounding lot. But the timestamp was clear. I was at that gas station at 10:17 p.m. Troy pulled out Madison's testimony from the trial. She had said the attack happened around 10:30 p.m. on a dark road before we reached her house. But if I was at the gas station at 10:17 and it took about 15 minutes to drive from there to my dad's house that put us arriving at 10:32 or so, the timeline did not match. There was no window of time for an attack to have occurred. Troy asked David if there were any other cameras nearby. David mentioned there was a traffic camera at the intersection near my dad's neighborhood. Troy immediately contacted the police to request that footage as well. It took another full day, but we finally got it. The traffic camera showed my car arriving in front of my dad's house at exactly 10:41 p.m. The car stopped for less than 2 minutes. Then it drove away. There was no time for anything Madison described to have happened. We had the evidence. Real, concrete, undeniable evidence that Madison's story did not match reality. I felt a weight lifting off my chest that I did not even know was there. For the first time since this nightmare began, I allowed myself to believe I might actually walk free. 2 days later, we were back in court. The courtroom was packed again, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. Troy stood and presented the surveillance footage to the judge and jury. He played the clip from the gas station, showing the timestamp and my car. Then he played the traffic camera footage, showing my arrival at my dad's house. He laid out the timeline step by step, showing that Madison's version of events was impossible. District Attorney Miller tried to argue that maybe the attack happened before the gas station stop, but Troy was ready. He pointed out that Madison had specifically testified the attack happened on the way home after leaving the party, and that I had driven straight there. The gas station was on the way home. The timeline did not work no matter how you tried to twist it. Then Troy asked the judge for permission to recall Madison to the stand. Judge Patterson agreed. Madison walked back up looking pale and nervous now. Troy asked her to clarify exactly when the attack had occurred. She stammered, saying it was around 10:30, maybe a little earlier. She was not sure. Troy pressed her. The footage shows my client at a gas station at 10:17 p.m. How could he have attacked you at 10:30 when he was still driving? Madison started to cry again, but this time it felt different. She looked cornered, trapped. Troy asked her point blank, "Did my client actually attack you, or did you make this up?" Madison sobbed, unable to answer. Then Richard, sitting in the gallery, suddenly stood up. His face was red. He shouted at Madison, "Tell the truth, Madison. Tell the truth right now." Judge Patterson banged her gavel, demanding order. But Madison was breaking down. She covered her face with her hands shaking. And then, finally, she said it. "I made it up. I am sorry. I made it up." The courtroom exploded. People gasped, whispered, shouted. Judge Patterson had to bang her gavel multiple times to restore order. District Attorney Miller looked stunned. Troy stood there, his face carefully neutral, but I could see the relief in his eyes. And I just sat there, unable to move, unable to believe what I had just heard. Madison, through sobs, began to explain. She said she had feelings for me. She had developed a crush over the years, and thought that night when I came to pick her up, maybe something would happen between us. But I had treated her like a little sister, just like always. She felt rejected, humiliated, angry, so she decided to punish me. She admitted she had created the bruises herself by hitting her arms and neck against a wall. She said she never thought it would go this far, that she panicked when people started believing her and did not know how to take it back. Richard looked like someone had punched him. Linda was crying. District Attorney Miller requested the charges be dropped immediately. Judge Patterson granted the motion. I was officially cleared. of all charges. But it did not stop there. Judge Patterson ordered Madison to be taken into custody right there in the courtroom. She was being charged with filing a false police report and perjury. 2 officers came forward and placed handcuffs on her wrists. Madison was led out of the courtroom, still crying. I just sat there numb. It was over. I was free. But I did not feel victorious. I felt hollow. After the hearing ended, I walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sunlight. It felt surreal to be outside without guards, without handcuffs, without people looking at me like I was a monster. I took a deep breath of fresh air for the first time in months. And then I heard someone call my name. Richard was running toward me, his face desperate. "Brian, son, please wait. I am so sorry. I should have believed you." I stopped and turned to face him. He looked older than I remembered. More tired, more broken. I just stood there and let him talk. He said he was wrong, that he should have given me a chance, that he failed me as a father. He begged me to forgive him. I looked at him for a long time. I thought about the months I spent in jail. I thought about the beatings, the fear, the loneliness. I thought about how he had called me disgusting and told me I was not his son anymore. And I realized something. I did not hate him. I was too tired to hate him. But I also could not forget what he had done. I told him I did not hate him. I told him I understood he thought he was protecting Madison. But I also told him he chose her over me without hesitation, without even listening to my side. I told him some things could not be fixed, and this was one of them. He started to cry, reaching out for me, but I stepped back. I said I needed time, maybe a lot of time, maybe forever. Then I walked away. Linda tried to run after me, apologizing, but I kept walking. I did not look back. The weeks after the trial were hard, in a different way. I was free, but I was also lost. I went back to my apartment, which felt strange and empty after being gone for so long. Everything was covered in dust. I cleaned it up, but it did not feel like home anymore. Nothing did. At night, I still woke up in a panic, thinking I was back in that jail cell. My heart would race, my hands would shake, and I would have to remind myself I was safe now. But my mind did not believe it yet. I knew I needed help, so I started seeing a therapist. Her name was Dr. Sarah Nguyen, a kind woman in her 40s who specialized in trauma. She told me what I was experiencing was normal, that being falsely accused and imprisoned was a form of trauma that did not just disappear overnight. I went to therapy every week. Slowly, I started to process what had happened. Dr. Nguyen helped me understand that the betrayal I felt from my father was just as painful as the accusation itself. She taught me that healing did not mean forgetting. It meant learning to carry the pain without letting it destroy me. Finding work was another challenge. I sent out my resume to dozens of architecture firms, but most of them rejected me as soon as they saw the gap in my employment history. Even though I had been cleared, the stigma remained. People saw the arrest and assumed the worst. But finally, a small firm called Harper & Associates took a chance on me. The owner, Mr. Harper, was an older man in his 60s who had heard my story and believed me. He offered me a position at a lower salary than I had before. But I did not care. I was just grateful for the chance to rebuild. Work became my anchor. I threw myself into projects, designing and drafting late into the night. I found comfort in the precision of lines and measurements, in creating something solid and real. My boss noticed my dedication and gave me more responsibility. 6 months after the trial, I was assigned to lead a small renovation project for a community center. It was not glamorous, but it was mine. When the project was completed successfully, Mr. Harper called me into his office and told me he was proud of me. He said I had talent and should not let my past define my future. Those words meant more to me than he probably realized. I also started making new friends. One of my coworkers, a guy named Marcus, who was in his early 30s, invited me out for coffee one afternoon. We talked about work life, everything. Marcus was easy to be around, the kind of person who made you feel comfortable just by existing. He introduced me to his friend group, and slowly I started socializing again. We went hiking on weekends, grabbed beers after work, watched football games together. I even laughed sometimes, genuinely laughed, and it felt strange at first, but also good. As for my dad, Richard called me many times over those months. I did not answer at first, but eventually curiosity got the better of me. One day he showed up at my workplace. I agreed to talk to him briefly. He told me he had been seeing a therapist too, trying to understand why he failed me so badly. He said he was ashamed and wanted to make things right. I told him I appreciated that, but I needed more time. He said he would wait as long as it took. I nodded and left it at that. I was not ready to forgive him yet. Maybe I never would be. But I was no longer consumed by anger either. I also heard what happened to Madison. She was sentenced to 18 months in jail, plus 3 years of probation. Richard and Linda ended up divorcing because Linda could not forgive Richard for not standing by her daughter more strongly even after the truth came out. Their whole family imploded. I did not feel satisfaction hearing that. I just felt sad that so many lives had been destroyed by one lie. A year after the trial, things started to feel more stable. I got promoted to junior project manager at the firm. I moved to a better apartment, one with a balcony overlooking the Willamette River. I even started dating someone, a woman named Emma, who was a teacher. We met through the hiking group Marcus had introduced me to. She knew about my past because I told her early on. I did not want any secrets. She listened, asked questions, and then told me it did not change how she saw me. We took things slow, but I liked being around her. She made me feel normal again. I also invited Richard over to my new apartment one afternoon. We sat on the balcony with coffee and talked. It was awkward at first, but gradually we found our rhythm. He told me he was proud of how I had rebuilt my life. I told him I had to, because no one else was going to do it for me. He nodded, accepting the truth of that. We were not back to where we used to be, and maybe we never would be, but we were talking again. That was something. I learned a lot of lessons from everything that happened. I learned that trust once broken takes years to rebuild. My father chose to believe someone else without giving me a chance to explain. That taught me to never make the same mistake, to always listen to both sides before judging anyone. I also learned about resilience. I spent 3 months in a nightmare, lost everything I had worked for, but I survived. I discovered that even when the whole world turns against you, you still have yourself. And sometimes that is enough. Forgiveness was another lesson. I realized forgiveness is not about forgetting what happened. It is about freeing yourself from the anger that eats you alive. I am still not sure I have fully forgiven my father yet. Some days I feel okay, other days the hurt comes back. But I am no longer consumed by hatred, and that feels like progress. And finally, I learned about justice. The system is not perfect. I almost went to prison for something I did not do. But I fought. I did not give up. In the end, the truth came out. Not because the system worked flawlessly, but because I refused to stop fighting for myself. Standing on my balcony now, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink, I think about how far I have come. 2 years ago, I thought my life was over. Today, I know it was just the beginning of a different chapter. Some days are still hard. I still have nightmares. Sometimes. I still feel the sting of betrayal when I think about how quickly my father turned on me. But I wake up every morning knowing I survived the worst, and that makes me stronger than I ever thought possible. If you are going through something similar, if someone has falsely accused you, if your own family does not believe you, please do not give up. The truth has a way of surfacing even when it seems impossible. Hold on. Fight. And remember, your worth is not determined by the lies others tell about you. It is determined by how you rise after you have fallen. I am not the same person I was 2 years ago. Honestly, I am grateful for that. The old Brian was naive, trusting, comfortable. The new Brian knows the world can be cruel and unfair, but he also knows he is strong enough to survive it. And that knowledge is worth something. Before I let you go, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where someone you trusted completely let you down? How did you handle it? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched you in any way, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with anyone who might need to hear it. Sometimes, just knowing you are not alone makes all the difference. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it gave you strength, hope, or at least a reminder that truth does matter. Take care of yourselves out there, and remember, no matter how dark things get, you are stronger than you think. Until next time.